When Samsung launches the Galaxy S series, the industry does sit up and take note, and as competition has become heated in the flagship space towards the lower end, where does the Galaxy S23, the base model, sit when compared to Google's own Pixel 7 series? Well, let's examine all the information. Thanks for watching 9to5 Google here on YouTube. Remember to thumbs up, hit subscribe and then tap the bell icon to be among the first to watch our upcoming videos. So you're probably wondering, why are we comparing the Pixel 7 to the base model Galaxy S23? Well, for the past couple of years, Google has offered an incredible package at under $600 without increasing its own prices. Conversely, Samsung has really struggled to stop the price creep of its entry-level flagship phones. The Galaxy S23 Ultra is the undoubted star of the new lineup, but where does the base S23 sit, and where does it compare directly to Google's own base model, right at the cusp of that flagship Android space? We're here to examine all of the facets of this, comparing the Pixel 7 to the Galaxy S23 hardware though, and there's a lot to unpick here, as each device has its own strengths and inherent weaknesses. Firstly, the size difference is not quite as stark as it probably would initially seem. The Galaxy S23 is a little bit smaller, so that makes it a little bit more enticing option for some of you out there wanting a more pocketable or manageable smartphone. That said, this is actually less pronounced than we initially expected it to be. While the Pixel 7 has a good 6.3-inch 90Hz OLED display, it is a few levels below the Galaxy S23's 6.1-inch 120Hz AMOLED panel. This is apparent when using these side by side, not that many people will do this, with the latter handset even having a substantially higher 1750 nit peak brightness in direct sunlight. Although it's not quite as bright, the Pixel 7 can actually reach a maximum 1400 nits in those bright daylight conditions for what it's worth. We also applaud the usage of uniform bezels on the S23 on all sides. More devices should really prioritise reducing the forehead and chin sections to accommodate even bezels on all sides. It's something we want to see a lot more of across the industry. After years of complaints, you might also be pleased to know that the Galaxy S23 series is set to ship with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 processor. This means that these two smartphones here, only the Pixel technically ships with an Exynos-based processor. Tensor G2 is impressive, but it lacks that processing power of Qualcomm's current flagship chipset for what it's worth. For gaming in particular, the Galaxy S23 should absolutely smoke the Pixel 7, and in tandem with that 120Hz display, things will be better in terms of performance with Samsung's latest and greatest handset. Elsewhere though, it's impossible to tell these two phones apart, at least in our time with each device. App loading speed's pretty much similar, and for most you won't see these extra performance gains when you're doing the basics like calling, texting, that kind of thing. Biometric security is provided by an in-display scanner on this Duo. Software-based Face Unlock was also added to the Pixel 7 series, but is also available on the Galaxy S23 if you don't prefer using your fingerprint. Samsung has also made some little tweaks to the Galaxy S23 design this time around. The wraparound camera has been replaced with camera rings so that the entire series is a little bit more design cohesive. The Pixel also includes design refinements with an all-meta camera bar and some other tweaks over the Pixel 6 series. You do also gain an extra colour option for the S23, which has more muted pastel colours across the board. It's also sometimes hard to explain just how different Samsung's vision of One UI is compared to Google's internal vision of how Android should look and work. Almost all of the core functionality is identical across the Pixel 7 and the Galaxy S23, but visually you'll see some substantial variation, as you probably have come to expect. Android 13 is at the core of this Duo, which is a minor refinement over Android 12. One UI 5.1 is just merely a step up over the version that you can already install on various Samsung Galaxy devices. This means more in-depth integration with things like dynamic colour and Material U. Visually, it's just familiar, as One UI hasn't really evolved drastically over the past 3 to 4 years. Google, though, has truly revised how vanilla Android should look and operate, and it does feel like a different operating system at times, at least from a visual standpoint. Credit, though, has to go to Samsung for its revised update schedule for its devices. Last year, the Korean firm said that all flagship phones moving forward will get 4 full OS version upgrades, alongside 5 years of regular monthly security patches. Even Google has yet to fully compete with this support window availability. On Pixel, you'll be able to get up to Android 16 within its device's lifespan. It'll also then get 2 further years of regular monthly patches. The Galaxy S23 will be supported up to Android 17, and then we'll have a further year of regular monthly security patches on top of that. When we consider the $300 to $400 premium for the S23 over the Pixel 7, this added support window does seem a little bit more plausible, although it is still hard to stomach. It remains to be seen if this would factor into most average buyers' purchase process, especially if you're buying this on contract or as part of a payment plan. We haven't yet been able to delve directly into the battery capabilities of the S23 series, but it sure looks disappointing given that expensive start price. Google has addressed lifespan woes in recent years by upping the battery capacity of all models, and this stands the Pixel 7 in good stead, at least for the coming years. Just how the Galaxy S23 will cope with a 3900 mAh battery and that display tuned to 120Hz each day does remain to be seen. It's also worth noting that while the Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 does tout improved efficiency, it will be needed to ensure all-day lifespan. If you do care about charging speeds, neither smartphone offers super fast charge top-ups, at least compared to the rest of the industry. The Galaxy S23 does lag behind the Pixel 7 in wired, wireless and even reverse wireless charging here too, and it's worth noting that the Pixel has enforced limits despite touting these higher rated charging options. You will need to use official charge bricks and the Pixel stand to achieve this higher level. Given the smaller internal cell size though, the Galaxy S23 should hit that 100% mark when you're charging these in a shorter time frame though. When we start to look at the camera quality, picking a bad smartphone camera seems quite difficult these days. From the hardware down to that all-important software, cameras on flagship Android phones are very similar. Most of the differences are just in how images and videos are tuned or processed, and that's certainly true here. From a raw hardware perspective though, the Pixel 7 does come up a little bit short against the Galaxy S23, as this includes a newer 50 megapixel main sensor with a faster aperture. There's even a third rear camera sensor for telephoto shots which is dedicated that offers 3x optical zoom, which does equate to 30x digital. An enhanced 2x digital zoom is offered with that 50 megapixel main sensor on the Pixel 7, and this caps out at 8x using that digital zooming technique on that larger sensor. At least on paper, the dual lens setup on the Pixel 7 does seem like a step down. Samsung and Google though tune their images quite differently, and that means despite lacking a lens, the Pixel 7 has access to Google software features that you probably won't find on the S23. Guided frame and real tone 2.0 are two such functions that Samsung phones lack, but that said, there are some extra functionality on the S23 like a dedicated Pro mode and expert RAW functions that you won't find on the Pixel 7 series. It's also worth noting both phones can shoot 4K 60 FPS, but only the S23 is actually capable of recording 8K footage. The selfie cameras are also similar quality here at 11 and 12 megapixels respectively, so there isn't a great deal of difference, but the S23 does have the edge in terms of modes available. So in summary, there's always a case for most people out there to look beyond this base model, at least in the Galaxy S series. In 2023, we think this has never really been clearer, especially when we start to compare the Galaxy S23 to the impressive Pixel 7. The extra $300 to $400 premium nets only a few hardware upgrades that will truly benefit that average buyer out there. Conversely, these upgrades might help longevity, which is an area the Galaxy S23 is potentially worth paying out an extra premium for you to go and pick up. In our eyes, the Pixel 7 has more or less cemented itself as the best entry-level Android flagship by virtue of that $599 entry price tag. At that price, it really does feel like a steal. And Samsung themselves don't appear to put as much focus on the base model of the S series, and that is starting to show year on year, especially given those asking prices creeping up. Is it a bad phone? Well, it's not necessarily, but it's just not as enticing as Google's own base model these days, at least in our minds. Let us know though which you would pick down in the comment sections below and why. It's always interesting to hear your thoughts on the entire process. But until next time, this is Damien with 9to5 Google saying thanks for watching, and I will speak to you later.